In three, two, one. Testing, testing. One, two, three. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another podcast from K-BAS. Today, I have my friend here, Shaowebb, to talk about fighting games and to properly introduce ourselves. You can consider this podcast more or less my debut podcast. I may have had previous episodes called K-TEIN. I'm not sure if K-TEIN is going to fall under this podcast since this is general talk, while K-TEIN is supposed to be more of a nuanced discussion about certain things. But without further ado, please take it away, my guest.
Howdy, y'all. I'm Shaowebb, longtime fighting game fan, lover. I've tried to make it a point to play as many different ones just for the sake of studying all the things that have been done with them. Fascinated with other systems.
Alrighty, alrighty. Definitely. That's why me and you were able to connect earlier on Twitter because we were just having this discussion about King of Fighters. Speaking of that, what is your most favorite fighting game?
Uh, they kind of circle. I'd actually say it's probably Tatsunoko versus Capcom. Uh, King of Fighters, it's hard to pick one. They all just kind of circle up there near the top. O2 Unlimited. It's getting a lot of love right now thanks to GGPO and a re-release.
Ah, yeah.
13, 14, 11, all of them's good. Also, shout out to Battle for the Grid. Very
Uh,
impressed.
very good games indeed. I definitely had my experience with Battle for the Grid. I'm not sure if I'm going to stick on it since I kind of noticed I haven't had uh, the best palette for active tag games. But if there was a tag game to really get deeply invested in, it probably would be Battle for the Grid a bit more. Ironically, people only call me a hypocrite because if you look at my channel, you see I have a lot of Dragon Ball Fighter Z on there. I admit admittedly, the only reason I even stick on that game is because I have a relative who is very good at fighting games, so I developed a personal rivalry to try to best him in the game. But if it wasn't for that, then I would not touch Battle for the Grid, not Battle for Dragon Ball Fighter Z with a 10-foot pole. While Battle for the Grid is a game that I'm genuinely like, this is a decent game. This is a nice game. I like my Toku heroes. That one's like Toku. Yeah, I like my Power Rangers and whatnot. And there are definitely characters who I like to play with in that game too. But
Oh,
speaking
for
of
sure,
that,
man.
I guess for myself, my very top fighting game will be Melty Blood, Actress Game Current Code. Just love how one, I'm already a big fan of system mastery fighting games. I know I've talked about system and character mastery in my K-TEIN, so I won't bring it up here, but I just feel that Melted Blood is one of the best balanced fighting game in regards to system balance. And I just basically feel that it has a mechanic in there that allows you to play both defensive and aggressively. I am more or less in love with the characters, and Melted Blood is roughly my, as I say, a proper introduction to the Dojin fighting game scene. There was another game that I did learn about Dojin, which was Eternal Fighter Zero, but Melted Blood kind of stuck with me way longer than Eternal Fighter Zero. Even though Eternal Fighter Zero is a good game, but for a second favorite game, I'm definitely going to probably actually maybe say Arcana Hearts. It's between Arcana Hearts or Nitro Plus Blaster, but you know what? I'm going to go ahead and say Arcana Hearts, really. I really do love Arcana Hearts a lot. And if I
That
did have
means a
to
lot
pick,
to me. Yeah, because
yeah,
like I was like the guy that was trying to get people to understand about that game, like making little flashcards to break down all the arcana and what they do
yeah,
per character, and I was trying to get people to see that it's a sandbox. It's
it,
really
it, it,
amazing what
it
the game
really is
does.
amazing. And even with the aesthetic that it does have, which ironically, one of the reasons why I even take to Arcana Hearts because I did have a younger sister. Oh, that's a younger sister. So I have a twin sister. And with me and my twin sister, we just did a lot of those together. We played games together. We played games like Fantasy Star Online together, Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles, and even some fighting games. And one thing I didn't know is that she'll always, play the girl character. But when I look at the girl character roster, it's like you usually only have like one to two characters to choose from.
It is the
So
whole
when I
roster.
so I can call Connor Hart, it's like, oh, this is all girls, and I know I have no problem playing with girls. So I felt like she was no longer pigeonholed to just only play. the token girl character in a fighting game roster. Now she had a bit selection, so and which she did take to a Kingdom Hearts, but eventually, she just stopped playing games altogether. She would go do her own thing, which is fine. But that's why I liked their Kingdom Hearts because I liked it how it was just all girl characters, so my sister could actually play a character she actually liked and not the token girl character. But then not only that, I also liked the cute girl thing. Around the time when Kingdom Hearts came out, I started to realize, hey, I do like shoujo manga because at that time I started to really care about storytelling and I won't lie, I still like my power fantasies from the shonen and other mangas, but if I want to see character, development with actual, how should I say, development that either makes sense or more possible feasible, I could definitely say Shouja um usually have that beat in the industry with actual character development and whatnot.
And for those
So
that don't know, in Arcana Heart, it does something very neat to keep you on like single player content. As you play through, doesn't matter who you play through, story, normal, arcade, whatever, you'll start to unlock character chapter where there's like storylines, little mini visual novel adventures, but you don't get the whole thing. So you got to keep playing to unlock more chapters to find out what's happening. And as you're learning each character and getting these chapters, you actually end up getting a better connection to the characters of who they are and what they're like and how they react to stuff. So it's really fun that they kind of dangled the carrot that way. I'd like to
yeah.
see that in more games.
Yeah, definitely. That actually does bring me to something I want to comment about when it comes to new games and old games, as well as the current state of games. But we'll get to that topic. But yeah, that would basically be my top two favorite fighting games. And my third one, if I had to kind of pick one that's a little more closer to mainstream, it's going to be a toss up between Visco's Breaker's Revenge, SNK Last Blade 2, or Our System Works Battle Fantasia. And I'm gonna admit it's kind of like a hard pick because let's say Last Blade 2, that was the game that I used to learn proper competitive fighting game. Like that's where I learned where tiers come from. I'm like, oh, so this is where the tier list is and whatnot. So Last
So
Blade
you
2 did
definitely
that
love
for me.
counters then,
Oh, what happened?
because like the games I'm hearing, like I didn't expect anyone else to ever say Battle Fantasia. I played Ashley. Like I
Ooh.
was, yeah, I
Yo,
know. I was
Battle
doing
Fantasia,
non.
I got a story. I got a story for you about Battle Fantasia. Well, actually, here's one thing you probably gonna be realized. Um, many people, like people who knew me from Shoryuken, from Dust Suit forums, they know I got a bone to pick with our system words. Cause I'm like, yo, fuck our system words. These motherfuckers. Sorry, let me stop. But the thing is, I got a weird relationship with our system works. One part because one, if you do know, Last Play 2 was made by Daisuke. Like he was with SNK at that time. And if you want to talk about storytelling, art, and music, it
Oh,
shows in Last Play 2. And in fact, Last Play 2 is what made me realize, yo, I really like video game, the art. I really love the music and whatnot. And then also, Battle Fantasia is also one of my personal love because that was my first like PS3 fighting game, and that was my first import. Well, technically, I did have Bleach DS as a import fighting game, but then Battle Fantasia was really got me into the whole importing nature of fighting games or gaming in general. And then Battle for just it looks beautiful.
oh
It was
yeah,
one of the
it's
first.
got like this
It was a fighting
watercolor
game that I
paint.
made my very first combo video out of. Like I made my very first combo video out of that game and whatnot. So I just got a lot of attachments to it. But at the same time, Battle Fantasia is actually a very good, decent game. This is the game
Oh
where
yeah.
when people are on Street Fighter Third Strike, I'm like, this is how Street Fighter Third Strike should have been. Parry should have been a button where where it can be vulnerable, it doesn't do the thing where you only got to pick one super. You have all to your all super. I never understood that design of, oh, pick which super you want. I'm like, why can't you have all of it? Why can't you just design a game to have all your options together and
Oh yeah,
whatnot?
it made it so clean. It streamlined the counter system for everything. And it wasn't like, it was a game where it's either or, like you're either all footsies, all counters, or like, you couldn't do anything crazy in combos like in
Yeah,
the old days. No, if you wanted to, it had like this mode you would enter, like this state that was very temporary, but like do crazy. I
yeah,
played Ashley, and for those that played Tatsunoko versus Capcom, you may remember Ken the Eagle had like these dash attacks that would go at all angles, like 8-way
Right.
diagonal
Right.
doing stuff.
Mhm.
Kind of like I guess Beowulf did those in Skullgirls, or like maybe John Talbot kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
Ashley
Absolutely.
in this mode, he could just zoop around you forever, and I fell in love with that. It was so
Yeah.
fun.
Um, for some reason, I don't know how it happened. Well, I did initially like Cedric, but I kind of fell in love with both Olivia aesthetically, but also even play style. I like how she was a princess, but she more or less was kind of, let's not say Cuba, but all right, she didn't look like she had the stereotypical look of a princess who was all standard beauty. Like she had, very, very, very short hair. Um, she and
Basically,
what
they humanized an ideal.
Yeah, she was humanized, but
Like
not only
instead
that,
of just
she
putting
was
on,
also a no, I like how she was the cheerleader, no, the flag bearer. Like they designed her like a cheerleader, but she was a flag bearer. So her outfit, unlike cheerleaders, where they show provocative imagery sometimes with cheerleader, she was like a flag bearer. So her outfit was very well, if anything, reserved, but also elegant and modest. So it was like, oh, this is like really nice and whatnot.
yeah, like you
So
could play as the girl character and not have to close the door and feel embarrassed that you're enjoying playing a fighting
Absolutely.
game.
Yeah, so that's why Battle for Ten just have a lot closer to me. And then Breaker's Revenge, if you want to talk about peak '90s game design fighting game,
Oh
you,
yeah,
you can't have that discussion without not having Breaker's Revenge. That just
and
has to
like
be in the discussion. And if you want to talk a fighting game that I feel that actually is probably the best entry, well, sorry, I'm gonna say it's the best '90s entry to fighting game, but but also Breaking Friends just had so many interesting mechanics. One, you could say that's one of the early fighting games that had something close to like a combo breaker with the breakers mechanic. But not only
yep,
that, I like how they had. Excuse me, I got a little too excited. I like how that game had handled chip damage, where if you had no life, your opponent had to commit to a more or less a command move. They couldn't just use super because they made supers very, very much safe and really quick and fast. But basically, you couldn't use supers to chip people out. I thought that was such an interesting design that they made sure that you had to use regular commands, which you can usually react or counterplay much easier against. I liked the
yeah,
other
no chip
design
damage.
where if you just stand still and block for 10 seconds without committing to a button, you get a damage boost for that. I like how even if you didn't know how to do
Yes,
supers, if you just build
yes.
your meter up to three, if you build up the meter fully, you just have an additional attack power boost from that. And I like how when you were stunned in Breaker's Revenge, they did use the design of where you had to mash your stick and buttons, but when you did, your character would do an invulnerable backflip and a pose. So unlike other fighting games where you're trying to mash out a stunt, and then when you do mash out, it automatically it accidentally buffers a move of command. In Breaker's Revenge, they knew that you were going to mash to get out of stun, and when you did, there was a delay period of basically when you got control of your character and you weren't blown up to a combo or accidentally do stuff. It's like, yo, this game just does a lot of right stuff. A lot of
Oh, it doesn't. There's
what?
so much good there because, like, one, you mentioned the attack buff because you sat there, got jailed, and you survived a 10-second pressure string, man. You deserve perks for that. There should never be a punishment on a guy for good defense. That's just as important as being a solid offense player. I love they rewarded that.
Yeah,
The flip out thing, that was perfect. Like that there is a delay, that it doesn't buffer and cause things because accidental inputs. I seen that break a man. Everybody's heard of Chris G. Does anybody remember what he played before he had more Doom? Because I do. I watched him die live on stream to PR Balrog. The man was still rocking Ryu and Wesker. He was playing. It was one of the tightest sets. It was right after Ultimate came out. And they changed some things on it, input buffers and stuff like that. And he did, I believe, like a forward heavy. And then he wanted to go for a regular quarter circle move. So you know what happened? He got a 3-bar Shinshore Yukon. It buffered on him. DP had priority. The input buffer was
right.
shorter. Everything took him, and you see the guy just look it up. PR Balrog, Chris G. He's looking at his hands. He's like got his hands off the stick. He's literally crying at the end of it. He gave up several times, seemed just shaking his head. The match was over. He got a shin show, lost all of his stuff in one of the tightest games there, got blowed up, and he couldn't recover. He never got out of his mind. And that thing there, where you didn't plan for accidental inputs, caused him to create one of the biggest monsters in Marvel 3, which was Moradun. So you got what you deserve for not designing it right.
Yeah,
That's how I feel. Like Breaker's Revenge, it did so many good things. It did so
yeah.
many things that need to come back.
I won't really lie. When I did get the MAME emulator and started getting access to SNK, because our first on Capcom games, because they were much easier to emulate. But when I finally got to understand SNK games, I kind of basically stopped caring about Capcom because one of the things I liked about SNK game was like, okay, I like how SNK did the 4 buttons instead of going 6 buttons because everybody believes that your games gotta have 6 buttons. But one of the things that I always
No,
like question about Street Fighter is like, I got all these different buttons, a different version of commands, but really only one or two of them are usually like worthwhile to use, and the others are just there. So I liked
just
it when
do it.
SNK
Yeah.
when you just had light attack and you had your lights and you had your hard attacks, or some of the other games had different combinations. But then on that, a lot of SNK one SNK just had different games. If you weren't into King of Fighters, you had your Fight of Fury. If you weren't into Fight of Fury, you had your Art of Fighting. If you didn't have Art of Fighting, we had your Last Blade, we had your Samurai Showdown. There were a
Oh,
lot of different games. You had
and
I
each
got a
one
chance.
specialized in something. Like World Heroes, that was a counter game.
Yep.
Breaker's
Actually,
Revenge, it had breakers.
I did play War Heroes First. I need to play more of that game. In fact, it's a shame that I kind of forgot that it exists until now. Since even one of my favorite characters in that, I love Jean. She's amazing. And if you want to talk about a game that also had a lot of different mechanics, ooh,
Oh God,
War
yeah.
Heroes Purple.
People don't even
Oof.
know.
Don't
That
they
game had a
don't
lot.
know?
And then
Oh,
they just
ooh.
remember like corny stuff.
Like for
Yeah, like
starters, having that full hero meter. Oh, you can never sweep me.
oh
You
man.
never got that knockdown. I was like, oh, that game just had
There
so
were
much.
so many good things.
I mean, that's the thing, and
SNK
that's the thing I like about
specialized
SNK
the
games. Yeah,
series.
yeah, SNK just does a lot of different stuff. While more or less now with Capcom Street Fighter, they had some of their explore, innovative periods, which that's where you got your Star Glader, aka Plasma Sword. That's where you got your Techromancer, aka Kaiser, or Power Stones and whatnot. But we don't get those anymore. And to be fair, I
No,
understand why we don't get them because I'll say this right now. When it comes to consumer, especially the fighting game consumers, they are very, very finicky. I can tell right now they are very
and that kind of
finicky.
brings us to like today, like the state of it. Like what does it take to please them? Well, you can't just have like an arcade mode and that's it anymore. There has to be something for them to do in single player, because a lot of the people you're trying to make your money on and have to are the casual consumers that always say like I don't want to go on line and watch a movie as this guy does a combo to me for five. It doesn't matter how hard they played or trained and that guy earned it. They're not enticed by the online, so suddenly you got to have all the single player content like the stuff that NetherRealm and Mortal Kombat specializes in, with like everything they're adding with like long story mode, tons of unlockables, little things that you can do to like customize and different. But then you got like the other guys, well, you can't just go for the casual money or you lose the core audience. So what do they want? There's got to be game balance, got to be variety of mechanics in there. There has to be options for each character, but there has to be good online. And that's kind of the thing. Everybody's yelling for everything at once, and it's kind of so hard because they want to please them, but at the same time, you can only design within the realm and scope of how much money this game can probably pull out. They know about these things, and for some of them, they ain't in the bigger studios. It becomes very, very challenging and difficult to hit the highest points and like have enough there. And I'm not certain everybody understands that on the consumer side.
I could tell you a
It,
lot of consumers don't understand because when I look at consumers from even televisions, from movies, from books and other stuff, there is a lot of they just want things their way, and it is very difficult to try. So as a person who makes stuff, I feel it's very difficult to try to do basically difficult to try to cater to that. I have to admit, from what you said, this is where I personally find myself somewhat at a crossroad, or where maybe I need to reveal myself as, how should I say it, a gatekeeper, if you will, in a sense. Um, one, I guess what I do want to point out about myself is one, I do think it's great when a game can um, basically offer everything it can for its players, when it can offer a single player content, offer multiplayer content, and a variety of other things and whatnot. I think it's great if a
Oh
game can
yes.
do that. However, I'm also in the opinion that a game does not actually have to do that, where the game does need to find its audience and then make its product for its audience. And I'm in the opinion that a lot of these games, especially or for at least the fighting game side, there is a very big disconnect from there's a very big disconnect from the people who made these games and who they're making it for. And I think that disconnect is due to I'm gonna say it's the idea of perception. Like how should I say this? The people who be saying they want their unlockables in a fighting game, or sorry, yeah, unlockables in a fighting game. Now, technically, I'm not against the ideas of unlockables, but I
But
am
what are we talking?
also I'm sorry.
But what kind of unlockables are we
Yeah,
talking?
it's
Because
true. That's
that
true.
can hurt
It's
the
one.
game.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. Like I heard, and there is a game I could comment where I think the unlockables did hurt it, even though there was other issues that came into it. But unlockables hurt. But getting back to my point, I am in the opinion that if you're making, I feel there's a problem where actually here's I feel it's a bigger problem. I am digressing. Forgive me for this moment. I think there's a bigger problem when it comes to game journalism and how we present games as a whole.
Thank you.
Like we're
Yes.
presenting games as engagement, as things we engage with, as a content to get engaged with, which is fine, but not every single engagement procedure works for something or works for a particular item. For example, if you are making a competitive game, then you need to present it as this is a competitive game, and this is and with a competitive game, it basically puts the idea that okay, this game is about competition. You shouldn't be looking to grind and unlock stuff. I mean, you can have
Thank you.
those in there,
Yes.
but really the thing is the game is meant for you to compete. So why would it have other things that's beyond just competing and whatnot? And I think the
Yeah,
reason
because like,
why, go ahead.
you can look at big games and everything that are like, esports and other stuff. Do they have huge single
Nope.
player stuff?
Nope.
A
Nope.
lot of them don't.
I keep asking over. I'm like, we got Overwatch. That game barely has a story mode, and people still love it. And one of the reasons why I would say this, now I can't say I was fully watching the PR of Overwatch, but from what I understand, Overwatch did just advertise itself as a competitive game. I can tell
And
right
that's the
now,
point.
and I can tell right now, when we look at some other games, they are so afraid to even call themselves a competitive game. They just want to say, oh, battle action game, arena game. Try to sidestep the word. And better, here's a good example. Let's look at Guilty Gear Strive. Now, me and you are both fighting game people, and I'm imagine people who here may also be fighting game players. I got a question to ask people. 'Cause I have said this in my previous K time, but I can bring it up here. So Guilty Gear Strive wants to be its bridge for the casual people and the hardcore people. And one of the ways they're trying to help people is one by identifying characters, uh, archetype, which I admit even the genre itself is suffering because people label like people label character poorly. Just for a quick example, me and you both play King of Fighters. You know who Maxima is, right?
Oh yeah.
Maxima. So because he has one and two command grabs, people be like, "Oh, he's a command grab character, hybrid command grab character." Where the thing is, that's he has that to blow up people who want to stay blocking. But does he get his reward off of that? Is that his safest option? No, his actual tools are his vapor cannon and his large normals with armor. So basically, he's a wall. But so little guys will say, "Hey, this is a wall character." No, they're just gonna say he's a hybrid grappler because I guess that's the easiest thing to know. Since a lot of people, even still to this day, don't know what a wall character is. When you look at Leon Mesley's video about archetype, when you look at a few other people video about fighting archetype, even when you look at Blaster Salami, who I do think do very great work for the Tekken community and whatnot, they are very afraid to highlight a character who is like defensive wall type character. They'll they would just say, "Oh, they're a fortress or something." Maybe I'm not sure if that's the best way to use it. I'm afraid to call something fortress and not just wall, but maybe that's something I gotta learn. But get back to actually the main point I want to get is, I feel in the gaming industry, especially with fighting games, we need to present these games as competitive games first. But let's look at Get to Gear
Yeah,
Strive. Get to Gear Strive, I think Strive is doing it is introducing itself as a competitive game, but you have other games that try to use their story mode as something to get interested by, or other games will use, hey, here's these unlockables, and it's like, but this is a competitive game. Don't try to highlight the things that can get. Try to highlight what
it
your
comes
game is
down
about.
to
Go ahead.
I think it comes down to diminishing return. If you're gonna do something, if it's gonna be in your game, you need to focus on it enough to do it well. So
Hmm.
if you're gonna be a fighting game and you ain't got like Warner Brothers money to back you so that you can be a game for every audience, then you're a fighting game. You need to advertise yourself as such and commit to that and the most important things on there, which would be balance, nice variety of things in the move sets and characters, and
Teaching
especially
tools.
the online. Yeah,
Te-
and oh god, the teaching tools is the thing that people there's so much that can be done there. And again, I'm not certain how much some of this would cost, but I mean, there's so much.
I
Like if you
mean,
wanted to, you could turn like even just combos, which isn't going to make you good at a game, by the way. They're fun, but it's fundamentals. Combos, you could turn that into a rhythm game. You could even make it a user created content thing where you record a combo versus character, you upload it, and it's now searchable by characters, damage, maybe even the type of move that it used. And then afterwards, it shows up, there's a ghost of the character on the screen, and it's playing at a half normal speed. And the input slowly fades in like a rhythm game, like Elite Beat Agents. And you suddenly start practicing the rhythm of the button inputs at half speed. You get through that enough times, you go to two-thirds speed, then full speed, then eventually the inputs are gone. And you did this. And that's a rhythm game all to itself. Just teach the combos. And the users put stuff out there all the time. But then it comes down to like, well, they've probably figured this out. I mean, I've even seen Rhythm of Fighters touch the idea lightly, like combos can be rhythm. But then
we
comes
got
up like,
slap
well,
happy.
how do you?
We have slap happy rhythm. I mean, that PS1 game, slap
Yeah,
happy rhythm, does it?
yeah. And then you're looking at it's like, well, yeah, but if they did that, how much upkeep is there on maintaining the server and keeping all the combos uploaded clean between patches and different things that happen? How much? Then you like,
Well,
oh, well, there might be cost in.
one
And then it's
thing
like, okay,
one thing I think
go
it's
ahead.
safe to assume is the goal is not really to teach everything about the game, but just get people to understand your game and then make them become competitive players themselves. And I don't mean competitive player as in you need to become a tournament level person. You just no, you're a person who cares about understanding the game and learning how to become better at the game. Because any person who is competitive, they will all tell you, yeah, their games like the mobile games, whatnot, which all got great learning tools, but they'll tell you you will reach a point where those tools are no longer enough, and then you start looking for the user content. Now
Yeah,
that's the thing.
like
That's a
it's
higher
user
level of.
competency.
I'm sorry.
It's user competency that's hard to teach, and like the user content is eventually what you're going to end up learning from. I think
Yeah.
being able to upload and search is very important.
Get back to I guess the topic that we were on, which is about basically the state of gaming and whatnot. Well, actually, I think we did more as wrapped out. We're basically on a standpoint, at least for me, I can say is we need to advertise these games as such, and also make sure to highlight the features that are. Sorry, reprioritize how you highlight features. If you are a competitive game, then highlight the things that are going to gear towards that, such
Yeah,
as
for the
tools
competitive
to teach the
people.
game, the ability to matchmaking, because if a competitive game, I need to make sure I can, get matched with people and whatnot. You should have both an offline and an online option whenever possible. I can understand certain games will definitely struggle in the offline, such as, well, actually, the battle arena games, they need to get on the ball with the LAN party idea and not rely on people using online because one, I like Final Fantasy Dissidia NT. I think it's a great game. I do like it. The online for it was terrible, but I still admire the game. But from what I understand, they didn't put any LAN option, and because they're closing down the server, pretty much you can never play that game again.
Yeah,
You
it's
can
dead.
never, or basically you can only play the single player content. While games that's way back in PS2, which had, let's say, the more one of the more earlier versions of Battle Arena games would be Virtual On or Torio Tagram. They had a LAN option. They knew what they were about. They're like, yo, we can have a split screen option, but it's not the optimal way to play it. It's gonna have frame rate drops and whatnot. We need to have a LAN option. Now, granted, LAN
And right,
option was more popular back in the PS2, but even with the Virtual On for the 360, that game gave you a LAN option because they knew the importance of it. Pokken gives you a LAN option to connect to different consoles and whatnot. It's arbitrary, but I'd rather have it arbitrary than none at all.
and right now, in like, the post-apocalyptic pandemic planet kind of thing that we got, online is more important than ever. Guys can't go out and stream a tournament because they can't get people together because it's literally risking their health and livelihood. So whenever you do stuff, please, can you please put spectator mode, lobbies, and tournament organizing stuff in your game for the online so that if they have to take this online, they can still present your product in a way that grows it and your brand themselves should they choose to. Communities are very dedicated and they lack the tools, the basic tools in online fighting games that should have been there to begin with to make your brand make money.
I'm definitely pretty much in agreement of that. I do will give leeway. Let's say, like for starters, My Hero Academy's One Hero Justice. That definitely doesn't have a lobby system and whatnot. But at the same time, I wanted to give that company the benefit of the doubt because this is their second game. They were first just trying to make a quality game and whatnot. They're still trying to figure that out. And once they can figure that out, then they're trying to like do all the other qualities of life and whatnot. Second game I got to mention Blade Stranger. We know how Blade Stranger now
Oh
just
man,
added lobbies, which thankful for that.
in
I didn't think
January.
we were going to get it, but I'm glad we did got it. I know people were definitely upset how that game didn't have lobby before, but I'm like, well, let's look at who Studio Season is. Their very first fighting game was Shining Force ES, which was arcade exclusive for a minute, and we only got the console because Sega allowed them to. They actually wanted to do a console because one, Studio Season is a console-based video game developer. They make their games all on console. Sega,
Oh, you're talking Blade Arcus, like Blade Arcus from
that
Shining?
yeah, that's a Blade Stranger, Blade Arcus. Yeah, Blade Arcus. Yes, that's what I meant. Blade
Yeah,
Arcus.
yeah. That game is
So
very good, by the way. It just kind of got killed because, again, it lacked the online, and it also had this weird thing of a launch window exclusive character that didn't come back out until they put that thing on Steam. So
yes, well,
it kind
actually,
of buried itself.
ironically, I think a year and a half afterwards, that launch exclusive character did become available for free for people.
Oh,
But
thank God.
actually, Blade Arcus Rebellion is actually now one that does have good on. What's that? You must say good. It does have online and whatnot. The problem with that is it's a product of its time, and by product of its time, Sega made them turn that game. Sorry, Blade Arcus Rebellion is an update to Blade Arcus Shining Force. When they made that game, they added the latest Shining Force character, which was from Shining Force Reframe, which became really popular. But when it came to all the other quality of life of the game, like Studio Season did additional balance changes, but they were not given any of the resources to kind of like really improve the game much more than we added more characters, we did some balance changes, and we did add it on online. But that's all they were allowed to do, and you could tell that that was all they were allowed to do because when they because one, the game did not even get a console release because that would have been on Studio Season's dime, I think. The Blade Arcus Rebellion didn't get a not console, arcade release.
No,
And
it
when they
was
did the
just for
tournament,
console.
they made the people do the tournament with the item system on, which was a whole
Mm.
mess of problems. Granted, items are not bad for a fighting game; they just need to be designed with it. The last game I can say that was designed with the item system in mind that does it well is actually SNK Heroin Tag, which is a shame that people just write it off. But that's neither here or there. But either way, Blade Arcus Rebellion, if you did get the Switch or the PS4 version, the game is more or less decent. But the Blade Arcus community, because they did play the arcade one and they still do kind of play it, they just kind of play Blade Stranger because they just feel it's a superior product, which even I'm kind of on that standwagon. like you can see what they learned from Blade Arceus and added to Blade Stranger. Since you know one thing about Blade Arceus, not every character can combo reliably. The defensive
No.
options are much more weaker and whatnot. So in Blade Stranger, yeah, everybody like uh, universal moves. Everybody can do combos more reliably and whatnot. So you just kind of see the improvement. And it's like, why go after Blade Arceus unless you just want that Blade Arceus taste of the game's mechanic, which
But that
I think
studio
is
does
good.
illustrate a lot of what we was saying, because you can feel the love, but you can also feel the restrictions on them, which is why you really have to present yourself as what you are. You can't really, when you know you're restricted like that, have the money and funds to do like story mode, unlockables, all this stuff. So you got to present yourself as a fighting game. This is a competitive game.
And I
That
can tell
way
you
you
now,
can
Blade
take
Arceus
what little
definitely did it.
funds you got and focus them.
Yeah, and I can tell you right now, Sega was not advertising Blade Arceus as this is a fighting game to get started for. They were like, hey, this artist that we got that people love from Shining, here's another Shining product just to consume. No care, because one of the things that happened when Blade Arc Rebellion did came out, I'm not sure if you own the game, but there's like a character who has a there's a character if you use as an assist, their assist is completely unblockable. And now, while initially some of us I thought, oh, maybe this was just by design. Here's the thing why I don't feel it's properly designed. There are other attacks that are technically unblockable, but if you use the parry mechanic, then you can deal with that. And not only
Yeah.
that, you can parry assist. But this one assist, if you try to use the parry, it just completely ignores it. It just acts like the parry never existed. So I'm like, okay, yeah, this was not designed intentionally. Like this is a bug because it's just breaking all the game's rules. Because you can parry other assists and other attacks that are considered unblockable. You can parry those as well, but this one you can't.
Yeah, whether that was an instance of their focus was being split trying to cater to all these other things Sega might have wanted, or whether that was just, the restrictions on them and they didn't have time to chase down
Yeah.
everything.
Well, the thing is,
You got
we saw
to,
that too. We let them know like, hey, this is here, and nothing has been done at
yeah,
all.
that's
And
kind of it. It's like, however it came about, if you're going to be a competitive game, then you have to take care of stuff like that. It has to be one of the biggest priorities on it. It was just kind
absolutely,
of thrown out there to die. Like, I don't know what Sega wanted it to be. I'm not certain they knew what they wanted it to be because, like you said, they just advertised like, "Here's that artist. There's something they're involved in." It's like they didn't commit to what the genre was and what that kind of game would need from them. And
yes,
that's kind of the thing publishers do sometimes. They'll be like, "We got to have a fighting game to show off our brand and all of our characters taking each other on," and then
right.
they don't commit to what the genre itself demands. Like, it's going to have to be very good at online. There's going to be a lot of support for balance in the game. There's going to have to be tons and tons of QA beyond what most games have for these kind of issues. And I'm not certain every studio, unless they have a track record of being involved with these projects, knows fully what goes into them. And I think that's part of the growing pains it's felt.
I think it is on the growth pain, but I do feel as consumers, we should also be moving ourselves towards products that do meet the needs we want. The problem is, how can we, as a company, to put in single player functions, put in good online, put in all these other things we may want and think are good quality of life, if we're not even supporting the products that go out to do such things? I mean,
That's right.
let's look at
And
Skullgirl.
it's one of those things.
Skullgirl was supposed to be the fighting game darling, and now I admit, no one I did bought Skullgirl initially day one. I bought both for the PS3 and the Xbox 360. I didn't stick with the game because that was when I was really not as good in fighting game, and I was still playing on the pad. I don't know if Skullgirl's a good game to play on pad, but that's neither here or there. I'll leave that alone. But I did bought Scorgo because I still like the fact that it used rollback. I like the fact that it was unique IP and it was using 2D sprites. But
It stood for something. Like,
it was something. And the FGC just did not care for it. For the greater FGC did
it's
not
one of
care for it.
those.
And it's like,
It's kind of one of those things that gets me. Like the FGC, we know we're a loud, vocal, but loud, vocal minority fan base. On we are the core for like this genre that started and got it going. But we're not the big dollar casual consumers out there. So like sometimes they yell for things just so that it gets done. But then I'm wondering, it's like, why didn't they support it afterwards? Like I hear rollback everywhere. One, good rollback or regular rollback? Two, do you really mean every game with rollback? Because there were quite a few indie guys who are like, you know what, man, I'm a stand up for something. And I didn't hear anybody at Punch Planet.
Oh yeah,
Like,
I can
I
tell you
didn't
now.
hear yeah, I didn't hear anybody with Pocket Rumble.
Oh, how about Omen of Sorrow? I did. I'm not sure if you remember the K. I think I may have showed it to you my K-TEIN episode because all right, I got Phantom. You already know Phantom Breaker. If you want to talk about games coming out, Phantom Breaker's about to come out. Actually,
Yeah,
whew, now
Phantom
that I
Breaker
think about it,
Omnia.
actually, you know what? Actually, yeah, okay. You know what? Those three SNK games, they gotta go to the back burner because Phantom Breaker does gotta be in my top three game, maybe top two actually. In fact, you know what? Top game, top game because I both compete in it and I also think it's a good product, Multi Blood. But then next one is Phantom Breaker. That is a complete darling for me. So that is my next favorite game. But getting back to the point, a lot of people when they found out that Phantom Breaker, Omnia's being made and it's gonna exist, everybody asking, well, it's gonna have rollback? Oh, no rollback, then I'm not gonna care. And I'm like, so so my question to you, as I posed this question on that episode of K-TEIN, I posed my question to everybody else. You're not going to support Federer because of rollback. Question: where were you guys for Omen of Sorrow? That $50 game that I bought, but I was wanting to play because it was a new fighting game for the PS4 that I was talking about. Oh, they don't like how it looks and whatnot, or they have any other reason. They didn't bother with Phantom Breaker. I mean, they didn't bother with Omen of Sorrow. Pocket Rumble, they didn't bother with that.
No,
And
no, they did not.
Brawlhalla, and there's many more games we can go down the list of that had rollback, and the FGC was just not part of it. So yeah,
It's
that's
not the only thing like people are parroting and making. It is very important. It is the future that we need. But people that act like you get that, you're an instant winner and you're at the top of the genre and you'll have fans everywhere, they are glorifying that.
yeah, and we know
Now,
rollback is not easy.
it's
I mean, it is a technology that's been here for years, but let's not act like it's easy, especially for a newer game. If it's an older game, yeah, there's a little more possibility to get it in there. But for newer games, it's not that easy. You have both chemical levels people talking how it's not that easy. Admittedly says like, yo, it's not that easy. We just now know how to do it, so now we can do it more consistently. But it's not that easy. And NRS said how they had to put a whole lot of money. They had to have a half a year development just to kind of get it to a functioning state for rollback.
yeah,
Now, I'm
it's
not
very
saying,
difficult on new AAA budget like games, and that doesn't make it any easier on indie guys. I mean, it's new. People are feeling it out and getting it to work with your game. You could have rollback, but you might have it done wrong, and it don't feel right. I mean, look at the
Q
things that
Street
it's got to
Street
load.
Fighter
Like,
Cross Tekken. Look, Q Street Fighter Cross Tekken. I like that game, but I'm not gonna act like that rollback was pleasant,
yeah,
tolerable,
like get
but not pleasant.
yeah. So it's one of those things where it's like just having it isn't going to sell the game, and just having it isn't going to make the game good. You have to focus on the actual quality of your direction with the game, its identity. And I think that was kind of what we was getting at. It's like, are you trying to be for everyone? Or are you trying to be a fighting game where it's just an esports thing where it's competitive? Because it's so expensive and so hard to do each of these things right. You need to streamline your focus. You need
Yeah,
to get just one thing right. Not everyone's going to have 9 digits from Warner Brothers to spend like NetherRealm.
yeah, absolutely.
So it's one of those deals, man. It's not what the FGC tries to promote it is, that it's just an instant win and you're the top dog. That's
That's
something that I've tried to call out. It's like you guys, you can't make it out like that. It's needed, but it's not going to guarantee everything. You got to be there for the game afterwards. That's on you.
Actually, yeah, it's right. And speaking of that, let's go. This is what I do want to type in about the fighting game community that I learned. It's not going to say it's simply, but I started seeing when I was early into the Shoryuken days. The FGC wants to put the idea that we're technically all together, one on one, brothers in arms, sister in the sisterhood and whatnot. My issue is if this was the case, why are we berating other games? I never really hated other games because when I was growing up, because when I did grow up and eventually started be able to buy games of my own, like when I started realizing that when I realized that I love fighting games, like I still liked fighting games, but I still played other games when I was younger. But when I realized I love fighting games, at that time I only had a GameCube console. And you already know the GameCube didn't have a whole lot of fighting games. So
Mhm.
whatever I found, I scavenged that and salvaged it and loved it. You want to talk about that Bloody World Power and Fury? Oh god, it was I love that. The X-Men Ninth Dimension, I love that. Clash of Ninja, I love that because I just had to try to get my hands on any fighting game before I learned about emulators. I just adore any fighting game I get my hands on. And it's also playing those other fighting games that I realized, fighting game doesn't only have to be the Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, or Tekken. I played S9 this dimension, and I still hold that game in high regard because I like the fact how one, that game has a super meter system where basically you have three super meters, but they all build differently. And you also have the ability to adjust which meter went to what. Went
And
to
that's what I think people hurt themselves with is they want to be a part of something. I get that. It's really nothing like it being part of a fighting game community for your game. But when they become insular and they start walling off other communities and going so far as to even attack them, I remember the Marvel community mocked MK9 like crazy when it came out, like
absolutely,
it was a
yeah,
joke.
absolutely, yeah,
Uh, There ain't no sense in that. There ain't no sense in that because whenever I left Marvel, because that was whenever I first tried to get big, and I learned how King of Fighters is supposed to be played. I was like, oh my god, all this was in there, HD combos. This is incredible. What else out there? Then I found Arcana Heart, like we talked about. How it had that sandbox thing with all the tools it gave you of like a full character's worth of stuff dumped on anyone can be balanced by their defense and their offense. Like, oh my
right,
god, that's crazy. And I looked like a lot of things in Marvel 3 took started in that game. What was in Melty Blood? Dear
yep.
God, so many games borrowed from it. By getting insular, by attacking everybody there, you're missing on how much good stuff was out there.
Mhm, mhm.
So much good out there.
Definitely, I definitely agree in that, and that's definitely one of the reasons why I became more jaded and more or less been an outsider at the FGC, if you will. Like I partake in fighting games, I see what the fighting community does. Sometimes I even be hurrah for certain things like events and whatnot. But but I can't really say I am of the FGC because I'm definitely not of the mentality of it. And in fact, this is one reason why I even start my podcast because there's very limited fighting game podcasts, and the ones that are out there, some of them either had takes that I couldn't agree with, or they only focus on one thing, one or two thing only. And it was kind of aggravating because it's like, well, we got these other games, and because a lot of people are insular, they're not aware of how other games work. Like right now, let's look at the Street Fighter V Winter update that's coming out. Now there's this mechanic called Beast Shift that now introduces a basically a very strong defensive mechanic where you can basically retaliate a person's turn, and people are losing their mind. Sorry, some people are already voicing how they don't like the mechanic because they don't like how when it uses a V gauge, but if it's used successfully, you get some of your V gauge back. They're like, "Yo, why are you doing it? This is broken. No game would do this." And I'm over here like, Chaos Code did this with Tactical Guard. Technically, Melted Blood does
Yeah,
this with his shield. Guilty Gear does this with Slashback. This other game does
I
it. There
know.
have been other fighting games that did a thing where it uses resources, but if you use it successfully, it then gives you a rebate on your meter usage. Ha-
Guys that have become insular have robbed themselves of so much, and they're very like blown away by like things that are borrowed. Like how I was mentioning Melty Blood and Arcana, a lot got
yeah,
borrowed from them. But they also get very afraid of things new, like, new meters, new system mechanics, because I've never seen it before. It's like you would if you would just allow other people to tell you what they love too and accept that they
exactly.
can love something different. You might find something you adore there. Third strike people, they love counters. They love counters. Why ain't there no game of counters? You just mentioned several tonight. Battle Fantasia. We
You
got
still
that.
you
World
got Yanago
Heroes.
Ross. You got Yanago Rasu. You got Akuski
Yeah.
Blitzcamp. There,
Phantom Breaker, that's one of your favorites. I think it
it,
literally has every counter system
yeah,
in the world in
yeah.
it all at once, plus clashes.
Actually, the funny thing is that it has. I remember how one of the reasons why people like James Chen. I'm pretty sure you know who James Chen is, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Everybody knows
So James
James.
Chen said he hate Street Fighter Perry because he hates how strong they are, and many people even share that sentiment. I'm looking at Phantom Breaker, which sort of has a similar mechanic called Nullify Attack that more or less does act like a parry because when you do use it successfully, your opponent is frozen and you're allowed to freely attack most freely attack. Now here's the thing. Now here's the reason why I like how what Phantom Breaker does. You have a guard gauge. If you do choose use a parry, it still uses up your guard gauge, even if you use it, even if you activate it. So let's say, for example, in Phantom Breaker, let's say I'm at the point where I'm about to get guard break, so my opponent's about to do an attack that's going to guard break me. If I attempt to parry it, if I successfully parry it, I still get guard broken. So this is how the game makes sure you don't always focus to just try to parry because you still are losing your guard gauge in the process, which I'm pretty sure would definitely alleviate the people who hate how parry just diminishes the idea of diminishing. The idea of diminishing of basically uh, throwing an attack out there because they'll think, oh, you just get parry every single time. And then not only
No, you
that,
don't.
the smart thing that Phantom Breaker does to also handle the fact that it does have a parry system, but they're still projectiles, they went like, well, we'll just make every projectile be multi-hit. There's like maybe only one or two projectiles that are like single hit, and the reason they're single hit is because they serve another function. Like one is a boomerang that comes out and comes right back, and another one I think is technically unblockable, but every other projectile does either three hits or more. So even if you do choose to parry it, you're still technically locked down, so the projectile is still doing its job of locking you down.
And I think the reason why Phantom Breaker got skipped was something we talked when we were tweeting together was like the original, it threw everything out there at once, but then they kind of got in the way. And then with like Extra and Omnia, it's like, look, let's have it to where they select this version of counters that they prefer. They select that version of counters they prefer instead of having them all at once and getting in the way and causing just random scramble flurries, especially for new players. I
Well,
think people may have came into the series and gotten overwhelmed. And as I've watched it do Phantom Breaker Extra and Omnia, each time I'm like, this, I need to go back. I need to start looking because there's so much there. It's got a lot of potential.
my experience with Phantom Breaker Vanilla is still limited to some extent, but I would actually say Phantom Breaker actually added more, like extra added more on top of that, but at the same time, Phantom Breaker you also do still pick style. They just added a third style.
Yeah.
They added a
Yeah,
third
like
style.
they added it to like honestly, if you could go back, you'd probably find me posting online saying, I don't have a way to quantify this. Like I can't call this bad. There's so much good here. But at the same time, I'm a little overwhelmed. Like
I will
and
say,
then
yes,
like,
Phantom Breaker is overwhelming. I mean, if you look at the Wikipedia that I made for Phantom Breaker, there's just a lot in there, and this is why I've been adamant. I'm like looking for any people who say they're gonna look into Phantom Breaker. I said, look, if you're gonna talk about Phantom Breaker, you need to have me involved, or you need to be able to look at this guy because Phantom Breaker has a lot of stuff in there, and all of it does seem powerful, but they all do come together in some form. Because
and that
just
comes
like you said,
back
everything
into like
overwhelming,
training the players. Like, you know,
like
the ability to train the players to understand all that. That's very key and vital whenever you're going to get
and
ambitious.
and admittedly, and I'd say that really is the main problem with Phantom Breaker. Well, one, they also didn't advertise Phantom Breaker as a competitive game. The company that did make Phantom Breaker, Magus, they're the one that made it, but the company that was publishing it was 5PB and Firebase is the Power, and they're normally known for doing a lot of visual novel games. So that's what they're for is. So they know how to advertise for a visual novel game. They're like, oh, well, visual novel games. What do people get attached with the visual novel game besides the actual story? Oh, they get attached to the characters and the voice actors and the character designs and whatnot. Like if you look at visual novels that's coming out that are big, they would do a lot of stuff to cater to that visual novel. Like they'll do a cafe design in that visual novel for a theme for a while at a cafe and whatnot. They did that same thing for Phantom Breaker. They did a cafe where Phantom Breaker heroines was dressed up, in the cafe and whatnot. And there are some people, to get excited about the voice actors and everything. Problem is, you don't come to a fighting game for that aspect because that's about getting
Yeah, it's
immersed
like you
with the
got to
world.
focus.
That's about getting immersed in the world and lore. And if you're doing a visual novel game or adventure game, then yes, that's absolutely what you want to do. If you have a
Kind of like
competitive
what
game,
X Blaze did with Blaze Blue. They're like, all right, for some people, it's a visual novel. So they made like Blaze
yeah,
Blue spin-off series X Blaze, and I think that
yeah,
was a smart move there. It
yeah,
grew the world.
that was the smartest thing because a lot of people who are BlazBlue fans who don't play BlazBlue, they definitely did touch that, and that's how BlazBlue got the fan base it does have because they know it's for
Yeah,
the market. And this is where I was telling people how like this is where I'm like should your game have a story mode? Like if you want, like here's a perfect example. Just like Overwatch. Overwatch does have a story and lore, but you interact with it differently. You don't interact through the game. You interact with it through the trailers they do, some of the movies they do,
the
the
events.
comics, and the audio drama. Like audio dramas is one of the, like Guilty Gear. If people really want to get into the Guilty Gear story more in depth, before they did a manga, yeah, they get the audio dramas, which are more or less like listening to a radio about the game story and whatnot and
I think
whatnot.
right now we're kind of at a great crossroads, and you can see this even outside of fighting games and video games in general. They're realizing that you can take advantage of social media to cover aspects of your product that you can't necessarily dedicate the resources to. Video games, you mentioned, like they're doing events online, story online,
Case in
comics
point.
online that they
Case in
couldn't invest in on the game. But
case
like
in.
you even see that now with wrestling,
Oh
AEW. It's
yeah.
like, where's all
Oh
the
yeah.
promos? Where's all the stories? And you watch Being the Elite, and there they are cutting their promos. You watch Sammy Guevara's channel; he's got his stuff and his side characters and
Right. Right.
stories. And you realize that's like we can get things over. Like wrestlers call it getting over with the fans. You know, that's
Right.
what it is here. It's like they got over with the fans in Overwatch by creating a social media thing. It's like, hey, everybody, here's a character for you. Aren't they funny? This one here, he's kind of the edgy guy for those dark stories you like.
Right.
They realized they could tell stories as they kept the game alive. Focus on the core game, so what they have is good, but then outside of it, they created a world that people could participate in, talk about on forums, and share
Right.
and draw art
Yeah.
off. They encouraged that.
And if
They didn't
that
just one and done it in the game and then said that was it. They kept it going. They did it online where they could do it at whatever budget they needed.
I think we will get to a point where a lot of people understand that the mysticism is actually a really strong tool where you give bite pieces of stuff but don't just give everything out. And case in point to the thing you're talking about, one competitive game that actually went about that method because is ARM, Nintendo's ARMS. One that is a competitive game. It actually advertised itself as a competitive game because if you look at all the ARMS trailer, like before, besides its debut trailer, which was just showing the performance of the Switch, if you look at good portion of the trailers and some of the Twitter things, they were advertising it as a fighting game, but the Twitter side also showcased characters' lore through the artwork and letting fans speculate. But when it
And
was
I think
inside the
what
game, you
happened,
get nothing about the story because the game is just focusing on the game. But if you step outside of the game to the Twitter and Nintendo page, then yeah, you got a little bit of more lore details. But they also didn't focus on the the lore, which that was apparently a complaint from many people. Sorry, if you're a fighting game people, they actually loved that it was just what it was. While people who are not fighting game, like, oh well, we wanted more lore. Like this world's so interesting, but we know nothing about the world and whatnot.
so like
But
if there's somebody out there listening right now that doesn't know these games or anything, I can spell this out real easy of what they're doing. Remember Team Fortress?
oh
It was
yeah.
just a multiplayer thing that was thrown on the orange box back on the 360. It was just its own little thing, Team Fortress 2, but suddenly, like, everyone's talking about. Why was that? Because all they did was spend time just building worlds, putting out funny skits with the characters. Now they had some models, little
Mhm.
comics, jokes, interacting with people. I mean, the game was pretty much just gotcha system for hats after a while. That's not dangling a lot of carrots for you to reach out for, but people loved the world. They got invested in it. Games like Arms, they were doing that. They
Yeah,
were going out there, character trailers, little skit stuff with art, little things they put out on social media, and the fans would take it and run with it and grow naturally on its own through them.
and they
I
did
think
even.
that's real.
Go ahead. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think that's what everyone needs to focus on now. Like, you ain't got to pump all your assets and money into this big design story thing. If you got the money to spare for that and you've already built the main game, power to you, brother. But otherwise, I think this is where you need to go.
Yeah, focus on what your product is, know what it wanted to be, and stick around that. I can tell you how so many products are get put by the wayside just because people. I'll say, if anything, either game companies or sorry, people who are presenting the game misrepresent their games, or people who are interacting with these games uh, engage in them incorrectly. I'm in the idea of you meet a product by on its terms, if you will. if I'm playing an RPG game, even though I have my bias towards RPG game system, I still prioritize that the RPG game should be giving me an immersive and complete story. If it does that first, then it at least gets more or less a passing grade. If it at least gives me an immersive story. Now, how I go about doling out that story can be subject to criticism, but if it at least gives me immersed in this lore and story, then it at least did that, and that's fine. If you have a
And
race, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like anybody listening, I don't want them to get the idea because we mentioned things like, oh, you parrot GGPO, but you're not supporting it. We're not coming down on the communities. We're not coming down on casual players. What we're trying to do is point out that all the behavior you're seeing from everyone is understanding. Game companies are leaving everyone confused sometimes because they're not clear on what their product is and how it plays. They don't understand the mechanics and they don't understand that it was meant to be a competitive fighting game. They thought a single player thing. They thought it'd have all these characters and stories. They thought it'd be pick up and play. They didn't understand. This this things that you're seeing, it's no one person's fault. It's no one failing and it's just on them and now they gotta get defensive. No, these are all symptoms that like things aren't clear
In
and they're
fact,
not being made clear.
yeah, in fact, a game that I complain that has an issue. Have you played a game called Wishmere? It's a PC game for the Steam. Wishmere, it's basically actually is a fighting game, but because it has a robust single player mode, whereas a story mode, a beat 'em up function. You know how everybody said they want their beat 'em up function in their fighting game mechanics. So they did do that and everything with progression and whatnot. But here's the thing: your base mechanics are still, but sorry, Wishmere was made as a fighting game first, and they added the beat 'em up aspect later on. Now, Wishmere, when you look at Wishmere's trailer itself, like we look at the character trailers and everything, it's like a character trailer for a fighting game. They're showing you that character's mechanics in a fighting game setting, in a competitive setting, because that's what it was built up on. But they did add a beat 'em up mode, story mode, and people think that it. In fact, when you even load up Wishmere, Wishmere said, "Hey, this is technically a fighting game. We highly recommend if you have an arcade stick that you play this game on an arcade stick. But we also did design it where you can play it on the keyboard and the gamepad. But we highly recommend you use this game on arcade stick because that was what the game was built intended in mind. But back to the point I wanted to say, because this game has a beat 'em up aspect, people play the game, play the beat 'em up, not realizing that they had to master the character skills and not just rely on the power ups. Cause a lot of people are like, "Yo, why is there like a like in most beat 'em up games, usually you have a move that hits hits all around you, but you take some
Yeah,
health, right?"
yeah,
Wishmere does
it's
not have that
basically because you could
because
be
one,
attacked from both
how can you
sides.
have that in a fighting game? How can you have that in
Yeah,
in the competitive field? And people are like, why doesn't Wishmere have it? Wishmere should have this thing. And it's like, well, they don't have that because Wishmere is not a beat 'em up game. It's a competitive fighting game first. All these characters were designed with risk and rewards in mind, and you had to play around that. But they didn't see that. They just said, "Oh, the Wishmere should have had a attack that hits all around because that's what all beat 'em up should do." And now they basically say Wishmere is an incomplete beat 'em up because it doesn't have the beat 'em up convention, where the beat 'em up was just more as an add-on to entertain people, but that's not the game's focus and whatnot.
it ended up being murky in its game design because it tried to be too many
I'm
things
not gonna say, I'm
and
not
it
gonna say
didn't
do too many things because
advertise to just one.
Wishmere does advertise it as a competitive game, but because the people who wanted to play it and just only cared about the beat 'em up aspect, they labeled it as a beat 'em up aspect when the game itself did try to present itself as a fighting game. Now, one game that did do it really right. Are you familiar with the game called Magic and Spell?
I've heard of it, but I actually have not played that one.
That's another rollback game which the fighting community does not pay attention to. Granted, this is not the most traditional fighting game because it does follow like Psychic Force slash Synchro no Ronde, the Toho projectile based fighting game.
Ooh.
It's that type of fighting game.
So yeah, now those I do know. Actually, for folks paying attention, today they just announced 15.5 Toho is going to get ported to PS4 and Switch. That is another Toho flight
It,
fighting game.
mm-hmm.
It's a
Attending
tag
me,
one.
yeah, attending me in Common very good game. I definitely own it on my PC, but I would definitely be excited if I could get it on the PS4 and Switch because it is a very good game. It is actively still played, and there is a community mod for it that doesn't put full rollback in there, but it is an improvement over the game's native net play, and the game is
I'm
played.
interested to see. I'm very interested to see if they paid attention to the mods because there's an English mod for it on PC,
Yep.
as well as the improved online that was added into it by the fans. So I would like to see it come through. Right
I,
now, it's only listed in Japan
I
for
have
those
my doubt. I
consoles.
have my doubts in it. I'm pretty sure they're just making it as well. One, we know they're making another Toho 3D arena fighting game, a fighting game. We know they're focusing
Yeah.
on that. So I think this is something just to hold over to get more extra money. I mean, we actually even though they announced that this game is coming out, they actually announced it a year and a half ago about a PS4 and a Switch version, which was one reason why I didn't even jump on the PC version immediately because I really wanted it on my console so I could play it locally and whatnot before COVID happened. But
And these are games that confuse some people because they see Toho, okay, it's a bullet hell. Okay, they hear fighting game. Okay, so they're just going to be in a regular style fighting game. Well, no, they're not. They tried to incorporate elements of Toho, so these become kind of tricky for you to get the point across until somebody watches it play. Like there's bullets everywhere, and he's just dashing around. What he can actually move through bullets while he's dashing? He's vulnerable when he
mhm,
stops. And it's
mhm,
like, oh, I see spell cards in this Asotan thing, but why are they all labeled weather? It's like, well, what you're actually seeing is a system of passive modifiers that are happening, and you can use cards and stuff to change the weather to get the boosts or the nerfs that you want on screen for a period of time. Like there's a lot
absolutely.
going on, and again, it's hard with conveyance to present the product on some of these. Some of them get really really tricky to get the clear picture
Yeah.
across.
Design Dog, a very good YouTube channel, which I recommend anybody who has opportunity to who's care about game design or just can't care about how games are made. I recommend you look up a channel called Design Dog. Good design, bad designs. And one of my most favorite episodes they have was, I believe, episode 7. And it was focusing on conveyance. In other words, communicating information without just outright telling you what it is, in a sense.
Yeah,
I can tell
it's
right
a very
now,
big thing.
fighting games has been very slow in convenience. We definitely have made strides, and I do have to give credit to Arsenal's works because they don't want to do that. Like with the whole, oh, if someone hits you with a miss up, now you get the exclamation mark, letting you know, oh, this person did a low,
Thank
I
you.
should have blocked
Yes.
low, or overhead, I should have blocked overhead. Or how when you're about to get grabbed, there's some type of visual cue letting you know, hey, you're in a grab situation and attempt to tech it. Because unfortunately, fighting game does have the bad habit of keeping a lot of information just secret and people don't know what's going on. They do have a problem
With
with
that
that
said, shout
conveyance.
outs to Killer Instinct. Killer Instinct
Ooh,
did
killing
so
instinct.
much right for teaching people about scaling. You're
Yeah.
sitting there watching that meter fill, waiting to know when the combo's gonna drop so you can cash out with an ender. That was
Yep.
good. That was good, man.
Killing
Get
instinct
people
does
to
many great
understand.
things. Killing instinct is
Yeah, it
definitely in
was
my top 10, but because I got other much more deeper attachments to other games, Killing instinct is not in that top 5, but it's definitely maybe top 5, but it's definitely a great game. But getting back to actually the point I want to convey about Maiden and Spell. So Maiden and Spell now, just for sake of simplicity, people just say Maiden and Spell and they know what you're talking about. But the game's full name is called Maiden and Spell Magical Girl Battle. In fact, let me look it on my Steam just so I'm reading it proper. But basically, Maiden and Spell is saying, hey, we're a competitive game, which basically lets you know, okay, this is what Maiden and Spell is about. So you're not really getting caught in the murky water of what is this game, what is this game trying to do. But let me look it up proper just to make sure. So yes, Maiden and Spell. Oh boy, ooh. It is on this title, but I can't read it proper. But basically, let me just let me YouTube this real quick. Cause it's not on. Where is it? There is a. Okay, yeah, so it's called Maiden Skill Magical Girl Battle Game. So because they
well,
use
that
the term
spells it out.
battle, magical battle, it basically is saying, hey, this is a competitive game. If you hear Magical Girl Battle, you're kind of going to lean on the idea that it's probably a competitive game. It doesn't outright say it, but it is basically indicating that. Thankfully, the game, when you look at the game itself, it does look like it is a competitive game. But yeah, in fact, I had the opportunity to talk with the creator when they announced it, and I said, "Hey, man, it's really awesome." Question: why did you call your game Magical Battle Game when your game looks like a competitive game? And they outright say, Yeah, we noticed that when people hear competitive, they basically get scared off.
Yeah.
So, but we did also want to make sure that people didn't know that it is a competitive game of some sort, in a sense.
So instead of calling it a fighter, they settled on a middle ground with battle.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and whatnot, and yeah,
And that
and
ties
just
into like the branding you was talking, like, oh, they're calling it this arena thing. They're calling it that, they're trying to get around because there is a stigma around
yeah,
fighters.
yeah, there is
Everyone's
a
like, oh,
stigma,
those guys are
and
like getting hit by thugs. Like,
yeah,
it
it is
gets
a
rough.
stigma, and this is where I say I can't even really blame developers so much because this is what the consumers do, or this is what the review people do. I mean, and whatnot. Like, yeah, it's issue of where it's an issue where right now, even when you look at fighting game reviews, you pretty much gotta look at a lot of them with a huge grain of salt because most of them just approach the just don't engage with the fighting game as a competitive game. They just engage with it as this is a thing exists. Like I'm really surprised how many reviewers or people will basically judge a game by how much unlockable it is, how much unlockable is available. Like there was a person who did a video for Phantom Breaker, highlighting Phantom Breaker, and he said he thinks the game is great in quality, even though he doesn't really do the best job explaining that. But he was also saying how one of the disappointing things about Phantom Breaker is how there's not a whole lot of unlockables whole lot
Mhm.
unlockable in the game, and I'm like, but it's a fighting game. Why would you make people unlock stuff? I mean, unlock stuff in a fighting game and whatnot. I mean, you can make people
Like
unlock colors, but then
colors,
here's my problem.
outfits.
Here's my
Yeah.
problem. I was like, if you have people unlock colors, apparently people get mad about that because what happened with Dead or Alive? Dead or Alive advertised itself straight up as a fighting game. They even gave you the option to just get the game free to play and whatnot. And so Dead or Alive had one of the best barriers of entries for the most part. There were some issues with Dead or Alive Sis, like it didn't have lobby initially, which was stupid, and you only had a rank match. But I'm also willing to give that pass because almost everybody expect a game on launch to be rough and going to get better on at least after the first month or so, which I think they did for the most part. But Dead or Alive, you had to unlock a lot of your characters' costumes. Some you did have to buy through, their microtransaction system, but others you could just unlock. But people crucify Dirt or Alive because, oh, why are you charging so much for so much of these costumes unlockable? But I'm like, these are cosmetic. Now I know a lot of people don't like the argument that, oh, just because it's cosmetic doesn't mean it's okay. Well, here's the thing: in games like, let's say, Destiny 2, Destiny or Anthem, those game is about getting your character immersed. Like building your character is the highlight of the game. So I can understand why having to pay to buy cosmetic is a downer in those games. But
But
in
in
a
a fighting
fighting
game,
game for a competitive
no,
game,
no,
yeah.
no. It's one of those things like, do you really want to have to unlock the whole roster? You know how
And
hard
that's
that
my
is on
dude.
people setting up events?
A
Like I've seen guys like try and do like old Smash Brothers Brawl. Dear God, unlock the entire game. Somebody's got to go through like, the emissary mode, do the whole thing to get everyone in Sonic unlocked. Like you don't want that.
but not only
You
that,
really don't need that.
it's not only that, but but the really major more inconvenience besides being a slog for tournament organizers. Thing is, fighting games, especially games like Street Fighter, Guilty Gear, these are all character specialist games. In other words, if you want to play a certain play style, you gotta look to a certain character.
Yeah,
If I want to
that is true.
Injustice 2, I wanted to play with Darkseid. I paid to get Darkseid immediately because cause again when you play a fighting game, or sorry, most competitive games that have you pick a character, those characters are an investment when you have to learn them. Why would I spend my time on a character who I'm not interested in, develop the muscle memory, develop their tactics? Why am I learning this character just so I can like another character, then go through the process of learning that character when I always spend so much time with the other character? It's basically Stockholm syndrome. It's like, well, I don't want to learn this new character who I wasn't interested in because all the, learning I did with it to unlock other characters, right, to unlock other characters, now I spend so much time with this character. Why would I want to go back start from zero, roughly start from
Yeah.
zero? So not
Yeah,
only is
time is very
unlockable
important.
characters it's an inconvenience for tournament organizers, but it's an inconvenience for players who are trying to learn and compete in the game. Because if you want to play with a certain character, but you gotta work to unlock them, you're more or less forced to play some other character, learn their ins and out, because most of the time when you're trying to unlock other characters, it's either a very long slog or it's a very hard process that the game requires you to learn the game proper before learn the game very proper. But now all this investment into this character who you were not interested in, and it's like, why even stay with the game at that point if it's that much? I can tell right now,
Yeah,
one of
it's
my
like
issues with many games were like One Piece Burning Blood. I think it's a very good arena battle arena game and whatnot, and I hate how that game makes you unlock the 80% of the cast. Even in Smash Bros. Ultimate, people did complain about how they had to unlock the whole cast. But I'm like, but this is what you people asked for. You said you wanted
yeah,
unlockables. You said you didn't want DLC. Pick one. I mean,
something that I
pick one.
thought something I thought was like just on the cusp of being a good idea for the people who want unlockables that died in a fire was Marvel vs. Capcom Heroes and Heralds mode. If anybody's ever heard of like Street Fighter Koryu or like these hacked mods that are crazy, you're throwing
Right?
50 fireballs every time you do an uppercut. That's what people saw Heroes and Heralds mode was. Characters that weren't in the game were like these little cards you could unlock and collect, and they would do things like give Iron Fist an air dash, make you invincible or like invisible if you did certain stuff, and you could only equip so many. But you would suddenly have a version of the game that you could play that had like all these broken rules that you could do like house tournaments and stuff in. That was great. And they didn't have any local. It was like an online thing on Marvel 3's online. And it I was like, oh, you had the carrot dangled right in front of them. It was a mode where they could change everything. And you saw some people try and do stuff like that. Like, you saw NetherRealm with the unlockables and Injustice. It's like, hey, man, you can get a different move for that character. You can get a different this. And that was cool when you had it in another mode. The flip side of that, though, was sometimes the only version of a character that was good was locked in that weird unlockable state. I remember Wii Fit Trainer. There was a version of her tool set on the Wii U that you could unlock and equip that suddenly made her good, made her really good. There were things you could do with Mario's good. Short hop, fast fall, landing leg cancel was something you could equip in that game if you unlocked it. But that meant that you had to unlock these for tournament. Those things were so good that people would rather play that and then they couldn't unlock it. So it's like there was something close and at the same time it wouldn't work for the diehards. Like
Yeah.
sometimes the things that are so compelling everyone want to go for them are so compelling that you would want to spend your time and play that version of the game. And it's really tricky. Like how do we
It,
give people unlockables without giving them too little or too much?
I
Like it's very tricky.
I do think there is a bit of a danger with doing something like that. We offer
Yeah,
something
like
that
move.
offers such a polar contrast experience, then it becomes people be like, well, why don't we just use that mode instead? There were people
Yeah,
when it came to Injustice 2 and even in Mortal Kombat where they're like, oh, why can't I use this move unlocked? Oh, sorry, this move I unlocked or the stats I built for my character in the tournament mode. But it's like
exactly.
because these things are not balanced with that in mind. But the problem is like, well, I want this because I invested into this, and this is where my line of, hey, this is where I feel a game needs to stick to a core thing, and if it wants to do a bunch of other things, it needs to do it as a separate game and not as a core thing. Because when
Yeah,
you have
because like
we have so much cross pollination, then the player base becomes split. Split. I mean, a good example of this, I think. Well, sorry, I
to
cannot
look at
speak
their
for the.
online,
I
like the
cannot speak for the.
players are playing one version.
I cannot speak for the.
Like,
I cannot speak for the NBA 2K. Sorry, I can't speak for the 2K games, but I did remember seeing a few documentaries talk about how why isn't 2K why aren't the 2K games more well known in the esports? I don't know how much of that documentary is true, but one of the thing is if you let's you know how there's the ultimate mode, which is like create your dream team mode. But if you didn't like that ultimate mode and just wanted to play the regular mode, the problem was pretty much 80. I heard like basically 80% of people are playing on ultimate mode, while the base game that's probably considered more competitively viable is not touched at all. So the player base is just complete split. That
Yeah,
technically happened with Arms because Arms does have a rank mode. Like if you want to play the competitive side, that's what you're going to rank mode for. While the party mode, that's where you could do straight one-on-one competition like a competitive mode, but it was randomized with other mini game modes, and majority of the player base was on the party mode because they wanted to play all those other different game modes. While the competitive people were playing in the rank mode, but there were so much less competitive people that it took long for so much for matchmaking, and that's the danger of splitting player base. I do think the
yeah,
idea is nice. Like I would like if we can have a mode that's dedicated for the competitive people and a mode that's for all the other fun bells and whistles. But then that's where the problem of splitting the player base comes in. And
yeah.
basically, I'm too
It's
afraid of
very
splitting player
tricky.
base.
That's why I'm like, how do you give them just enough? And why I think that there's no problem in giving people unlockable colors and outfits as things in a fighting game because you saw like, oh man, it's real exciting. Iron Fist has that air dash. At the same time, would I have been playing the regular game as an Iron Fist main if I had a version of him that was good over there in Heroes and Heralds that I could play online with everybody and in local tournaments? I'd be pushing for the Heroes and Heralds tournament. And
Yeah,
that becomes an absolute mess. I mean, you saw that with Street Fighter, Tekken, and Gems. I mean, it can become really hectic trying to deal with all that. There's
it,
just a lot involved. It's one of those things where it's like the end thing is like look at the problems that you face as both developers and fans. Developers want to showcase all their product to get it across, so fighting games are something they go for. Well, that becomes a problem to developers of fighting games because it means the way they're advertising is something for everyone. But if it's going to be a fighting game, they need to commit to it being a fighting game. It's going to have to be competitive. And then comes in the problems of how do we convey the tools of the game? I mean, it's not like in Devil May Cry or something where, like, as you play, you slowly learn a little more, you gain a tool. And by the time you're at the end of the game, you're like, man, I'm way better at this game than when I first picked up the controller. Now you're thrown in the deep end in a fighting game, and it's hard to get past that. And there's just so many challenges in the genre, and I don't think either the players or the developers we've all figured out yet just how we can meet the needs of the genre and the fans on both sides of the field. It's very complicated in fighting games.
I could tell you right now. If you're familiar with Super Castle Beast, which features Wooly and Pat, Pat had posed that same question to Wooly, asking, "Hey, what can fighting games do to get more popular?" And Wooly just summed up saying, "Work." And the truth
Yeah,
of the matter, that's what it is. It's work. One, we have to not even act like all these triple. All right, let's not even act like Final Fantasy is as big as it is just because of the game alone being great. It was due to the community being word of mouth. It was due to the fan arts that were made. It was due to the theories and all the other homages. Basically, what I feel what we need to come to point is there needs to be the idea that you have a person who creates a product that people care about, but then not only do you just create that product and make sure it does good by the people who care about who are your fans, you also network with the fans to help make that product better by having people like how people have influencers for your product to showcase your product to advertise your product. Like Dragon Ball Fighter Z, when it first initially came out, when it was having its debut, they did have a mini tournament and hire a bunch of competitive players so people could get excited for it. But they also did have the voice actors and a couple of other bells and whistles to attract people who are just Dragon Ball fans and whatnot. It was basically an active community work of both the fans and the people who are creating the product. And I think it needs to
that's
continue to
why I
be
get
that.
really worked up, like about like how I was going off earlier. Like you need to give them stuff like spectators and lobbies and tournament stuff in there. Like other esports games, they build a lot of stuff in there specifically for people to grow the product for them online and with streaming and stuff. And I really wish fighting games put a bigger emphasis on putting tools in there because growing their game is a community thing. It's not just the Twitter people like we said in the ad campaigns like with Team Fortress. It's letting people have the tools they need to just pick it up and run with it. They want to show it off as their product online that people will know them for playing.
And I feel we're only going to get ahead of this is if we communicate. And I'm by communicate as in you speak to me, I listen. You speak to you, I listen, and then we have a discussion. Not just
Yeah,
it's this way or that way. Like
and
we're
it's
pro-
become a problem with forums because forums, there was the big split and everything with NeoGAF and Reset Era several years ago. And I've noticed that like people know that like flame wars happen and attacking happens on there. And I see like most forums are people they show up and they do like a drive-by opinion and they don't interact with anyone. And all the interaction, all the communication seems to be on Discord where it's private now, so people don't get it on Google searches. And I think a lot of stuff is there. It's harder to find the communication. We've kind of locked it in private rooms. Discord is
and
wonderful, but it's a double-edged sword on there.
yeah, absolutely right. I mean, Discord is a very insular thing, and this is what Jam and a few other people who were, like Max Spicer, which is FGC Hollywood podcast. They're saying, "Yo, we don't have a lot of fighting game. Sorry, we don't have a lot of fighting game podcasts. Which podcasts are the places where people can have discussion, share opinions. Like I listen to a lot of podcasts, which includes FGC Hollywood, Ultra 10, I don't really listen to event hubs, but I'm about to reopen that channel because even though I do not really like majority of these things, the thing is I do want to know what is the current state of these communities, what is the opinion, and where are the discussions. The thing that even prompted me to even do this, besides Max Fletcher saying, "Hey, we should have more fighting game podcasts," the reason I wanted to do this, start becoming a podcast myself, is so we have another voice bringing up things like I want to bring to attention how we have had games that done XYZ thing that you people say you wish some games have done. I want to bring to attention how well if anything some of the hypocrisy of a scene as well as try to get people to understand not get people to understand but rather I want to convey the idea that we need to be more perceptive and open to what is currently out there and available. That is currently happening now because of the current pandemic, but I don't want that to go away just once the pandemic is over. We need to constantly be perceptive of what is happening with our with the products we love, with the gaming cultural, with the fighting game cultural, and constantly looking to either try to improve it, bring awareness of certain things, and overall have discussions, have people
And
talk about
that's
stuff.
really it.
Like,
Like, I think podcasts are really the way to go with that now because people are getting like fired and losing their jobs for something stupid they posted just trying to be shocked by when they're 14. People don't like to leave things on forums, so discussion doesn't really happen out in the open. It moved toward Discord like, oh, I can breathe, I can talk here. I can get salty if I want. I can talk regular stuff if I want, but it's all hidden. People don't know what's going on in the communities, the history of a community, it's all hidden. Now
uh,
with a podcast, you can put that open, that discussion thing that people need out there. You're not going to get like a drive-by opinion or a derail that's not part of the topic like forums have kind of fell apart with after things kind of blew up online and got really crazy. I think this is what's needed. I think people need something they can listen to and hear the talk and discussion for themselves and maybe participate in.
definitely. I was definitely being lazy on that front because I just want somebody else to just start talking about the stuff I care about. Like, one thing I was surprised, if I may comment, are you familiar with Dream Council? I imagine you are since you are a King of
Oh
Fighters fan.
yes, yes I am. Oh,
So I remember one of the last episodes of Dream Council was talking about, all right, we got King of Fighters 15 announced, but what do we do to try to get people to, play the game? And I was personally disappointed with some of the points they did have. Not because they were not good points, but they were all points of like, you know, get in touch with the community and just start playing the game and don't be afraid to play the game. My problem was well, what are some people's problem when they play the game? Like they keep. I guess one thing that I really get disappointed with is how. Actually, here we go. The fighting community, even though we have a lot of great learning resource tools, a lot of us are really bad at teaching people themselves. Yes, I'm going to
Yeah,
still put an emphasis that game developers need to provide people the tools to learn the game, but the community itself also needs to do a better job of teaching people. And if I'm correct, I'm not sure if it was during this podcast or the previous podcast, but I was talking about how we had a problem where games have a issue of presenting certain things. Like, actually, here we go. Guilty Gear Strive is looking to try to introduce people to fighting games, and they're trying to even organize the data so people can learn stuff by even categorizing their characters into archetype, where they wanted to have Soul be the brawler and Kai to be the rail rounder and Potemkin to be the grappler. Now, if you're familiar with the series, and if you're familiar at least a bit with fighting games, you know that Axel is a zoner. That's what he does. That's his thing. We know that. The Guilty Gear's been on fire. People know when we look at Axel, that's a zoner. They did not use the zoner art. They did not call him the zoner. They call him tricky.
trick. Oh,
How do you
that's so
How do you
ambiguous.
exactly? How do you quantify? You will call Soul Rushdown. You will call Potemkin Grappler, but they're afraid to use the word zoning. And here's actually another case that even's afraid to call a character a zoner. Back in Smash Bros. Ultimate, when they released
Oh,
Byleth is basically a zoner. They would make sure not to say zoning. They said long range demon, and I'm like, what are you doing? You but you will call other characters rushdown. You will call them up close fighters, combo characters, but they will not call them zoners. And I'm like, but that's what they are. And to get back to the point I want to say is King of Fighters. One, you gotta play with three characters. Second, one King of Fighters is a system game where you gotta learn the game system, which means you gotta learn to hop, to dodge, and whatnot.
oh
But
yeah,
you also have to know what is your character's function. Because unlike a game like
exactly.
what does your character function as? What is Kyo? How does Kyo operate? What are your characters' goals? 'Cause in fact, that's what a lot of people need to know about characters. Characters have goals, and just like in Overwatch, let's say you want to play Mercy, you're the support character, you're the healer. What is your goal as a healer? I'm going to heal my team and keep my team alive. So
Yeah, a lot of people don't even realize with King of Fighters, as far as like goals and roles and what it's telling them and everything
exactly,
with the conveyed stuff, it's one of the worst, sadly, in conveying data and getting you
I'm
to
gonna say
understand
fighting
what it
games
means.
as a whole, and I can understand why to some extent because you don't want to pigeonhole a character into an archetype because then that means they only do that when in the game a character can usually adopt more than one playstyle. And in fact, this is where I want to give credit to the Pokken community because one of the Pokken community when they did their character guides, one of the first things they did say was, okay, characters do have certain playstyle, but that does not mean they are limited to that. They can adopt other playstyles. However, when we do mention their playstyle, we mean they're the most efficient at that playstyle.
Yeah,
Like let's
it's
say
like,
like Gardevoir. Gardevoir is the most efficient as a zoner. That doesn't mean she doesn't have mix-ups. That doesn't mean she doesn't have vortex. That doesn't mean she can't pressure. She can do that.
well, look at Keo. Like, how many teams you seen with Keo on point? How many teams you seen with him as anchor
I mean,
in
seeing
the
out of
middle?
mid. Exactly. That's what a well-rounded character is. Usually, a well-rounded character is a character who can kind of fit all roles.
It's like, so
While
who's on point? Like, why are they on point? Well, in a
and
game like King of Fighters, it's like a gauntlet, so the meter carries over. So if there's somebody that does a lot of damage with meter, you want people that build meter at the front of your team as batteries, like
absolutely.
King. That's what you do. They're building up stuff by nicking away and frustrating people with projectiles
Yeah.
forever and getting
Now
those hits and
it,
building
it's
meter.
it's definitely not the law, but it's definitely. And the point I want to get back to is in that Dream Council podcast when they dedicate their whole hour and a half like podcast to what can we do to help get people playing the game. No one commented about how do we help characters understand character functions. It seems like there's this
Yeah.
idea that character function will only be understand on like a I guess intermediate level and whatnot. Where no, that's not the case. People do want to know what their goals are. That's the reason why I feel the reason why team games such as MOBAs, Team Fortress, and Overwatch are popular is because people know what their goals are, so they can focus on that one thing. when you know what you're supposed to do, you are willing to be more willing to grind and learn because you at least know you have an end goal and what you're trying to do. You at least know you probably lost because you didn't meet your character's end goal. So I was
Yeah,
really
like I'd
disappointed
say, like
how
even
no
if it
one.
was just a meter, like just like a little picture next to him that had bar graphs that said like long range tools, and the bar is nearly
Yeah,
full with king.
yeah,
Like it wouldn't give the full story. It'd be a little murky. You're not certain which tools to use, but you realize this person plays better at a distance and
yeah.
frustrating. And it says like roll, battery, builds
Exactly.
meter for team, roll, heavy damage. This is the guy that finishes the job at anchor. Like, then it's just like good at everything. They got like a chart that's kind of full. Like it's not going to give the full picture, but at least guys will have an idea what they're getting
Yeah,
into.
yeah, and this is why I feel that we need to, do a lot as and I feel that's what one game verse we do about, but I felt that's what we need to do. And when the king and these people who were all in the tournaments and trying to teach player, it's like they didn't comment about that in that podcast, and I was like disappointed. I'm like, why didn't we look? Why? In fact, I don't think there's a lot of times where there's a lot of content that's out there about teaching players, and one of the things they don't talk about is how do you identify a character's archetype? How do you identify a character? How do you identify
And
what their role is or what their function is? Again, going back to like I said with Street Fighter E Honda, I'm not sure if I was in this podcast or the previous one, but E Honda is a wall, but everybody's like, oh, well, he's supposed to be pressure and grappler. Well, no. I mean, in fact, E Honda is doing better by not committing to anything, by just standing still, slowly closing in, and just walling you out because of his good buttons. But I guess at the same time, that's not a popular play style. So that's why it took a long time before he kind of got up there because people didn't understand his play style until people did. Same thing with King of Fighters 14 because I do like 14. Mian, people are like, oh, people couldn't really understand Mian. They thought she was going to be some mix-up character because she got so much mobility. Mobility, she could hit from crossover. This must be what she's about. Where actuality, well not actually, but in competitive high level play, it's found out. Oh no, she's actually better as just a runaway character, and she actually is a wall. She's just a mobile wall, but she does have a lot of moves that are just armor or low or high profile that allows her to evade and whatnot.
And see, this is something that I want to shout out on esports when they're running tournament. I get you got to make your money, but I don't need to spend 20 minutes looking at that picture of a chair up there. We've seen what the NFL does. They have somebody in the booth hitting the button and cropping good spots. And that can just be somebody on the commentary table hitting like a little thing to signal clip this. You need two sets of commentary teams. I know it's exciting to hear IFC Yipes up there talking all kinds of crazy stuff, making up words and going, ooh, ooh, every time someone gets hit over and over. That's in the moment. That's the kind of stuff people need for the energy.
To
But
be
then when you got your downtime on setup, you go like, let's take it away to Ultra Chin or Ultra David and James Chin. And they got the breakdown. It's like, all right, now you see here, he got him afraid of the high low so much that the guy completely forgot about throws. After that, he completely broke his mind. That's how he was able to do walk up throw. The guy was completely lost. He had him so tied up in the mix up game that he could just walk in on him. Like you need to convey that because then people will start to learn as they're watching these games.
to be
I know we
fair,
can't get it all. Yeah, and it would be good. It would be
you're
so good.
absolutely right. But that is actually the
You
next
can't do it on
problem.
the fly.
You're right,
Like
and that was actually the next thing that even Sage and Ultra Traver, Sage and many of the pillars were saying we need to have more commentators. Like we got the
yes,
people in there, but
yes.
there needs to be more commentators now, and that's the thing. We don't have enough people who are making content like podcasts. We don't have enough people who's doing proper guys. Like we got people who are doing guys, but doing it proper. Like I do thank God that does exist and give me information about my characters, but I don't like when I have to constantly go through the pros and cons of a character, and the pros and cons is, oh, this character has a funny sound, or you're considered a wiener if you use this character. I mean, I'm down for jokes, but not when not when I'm at a resource that's about all business.
Yeah,
Don't
it's like, look, if I was gonna play like that, Oh, well, Ruby Rose is garbage because she can get irritating listening to her in Blaze Blue Cross Tech Battle. She was bodying people out there. You can't really advertise a game like that because some people take it to heart and get the wrong idea. Again, you're muddying the waters.
And that's the problem because some people, I mean, that's one issue with the fighting community because a lot of it is the idea of the
The cool guy.
backyard attitude where like, oh, we're not professional, so we just do a lot of jokes and giggles and tricks and whatnot. I ain't gonna lie, I love CEO Taku and I love what, and I understand its theme, but sometimes it's like, why do we have these body pillows here? Why do we have some of this other stuff here? I mean,
Well, it's like like I'm not into sports or football or anything like that, but I look at the production value of somebody came through an animation degree and had to learn video production. And I look at
exactly.
that and it's like, why aren't we taking notes on esports? We could still show that advertising picture of a chair spinning in the bottom corner and stuff. We could even do a shout out. It's like, hey, Slim Jims presents the moment of the day. Take it away, Ultra David. And he breaks down this clipped point and everything. And they go through it. And then before the next match comes up, it's all right, these guys are known for playing these characters, but the way they play them is very particular. He is more aggressive than most with this character, likes to go inside, which means these are the tools he uses. Suddenly, in 2 seconds, that didn't take me long to say, somebody's like, oh, if I want to be aggressive and I like that character, I need to be doing that. Somebody's like, oh, okay, that's how he got that hit. He made him think about the high and then he did the throw. Like, these are so important. Not
Yeah,
just sitting
absolutely right.
there talking about they got a weird voice. Like the information you give needs to be better if we're ever going to get past this. And there's a lot of presentation that is on the community. And there's some stuff that needs to be in the game. I remember TVC, its move list didn't even have a complete move list. It was garbage in that game. I mean, it
The
was
fact that the move list was tied behind a stick.
oh god, yeah.
Woo!
And it would actually block the game. It would be on the game while you was playing, like on the field, covering stuff up. Like they at least grew past that,
Actually,
thank
as
God.
much as I love Phantom Breaker, don't expect them to have a move list because they didn't have it with the original Phantom Breaker. They didn't have it in Extra, so they're probably not gonna have a move list in Phantom Breaker Omnia. If they do, I'll be pleasantly surprised, and I'll actually give them a round of applause. But I'm not holding my breath considering how they've been handling their previous projects. But
Well, I
actually,
gotta
we're gonna
say, shout outs to Chaos Code for giving me a little animated gift to know what that tool is I'm selecting to use at the beginning of the match. Gotta give a shout out to
right,
Killer Instinct for
right.
having a little pop up that drops down and says what the tool is, what it's used for, and when it's good.
Give me that
Because
frame
then I can
data.
look at them.
That,
Oh
that
my God, yeah,
you
frame
give me
data.
you
Shout
give me the
outs to
frame data,
Nether.
and you were even willing to suggest like, hey, this move has this. Consider using it in those situations. Like you were willing to give
Yeah, it
suggestion
was
on what a
beautiful.
move is instead of just
I
being,
remember.
all right, here's a command, and you just gotta figure out what is the command supposed to do.
Man, I wore the spine out on the Prima guide for Marvel 3 because they called that thing the Bible because it had frame data in it. The person that worked on it made it a point. The games, they get updated so much now, that ain't exactly viable using them Prima guides anymore unless it's a digital one that updates automatically in an app or something. So you got to have that in the game. People need that stuff. Look at what happened to the Melee community the moment somebody gave them frame data. That blew up. I mean, this is important conveyed stuff. If you're gonna present yourself as a fighting game, these are some of the big points that you need to focus on. And then go to social media, you know, encourage the right kind of tools and everything in the game for
Team
streaming.
Ninja was doing that with Dead or Alive, and that's why I was more or less tooting their horn when Dada Lie was on the run. Cause I'm like, yo, they're actually advertising game mechanic. They're saying, hey, this mechanic used to do this. Now it used to do that. This character can do this, but now they can do it this time. This character is actually this good in that play style and XYZ. I'm like, yo, you're doing it. You're advertising your game as a competitive game. You know who your audience are. While their YouTube page was just all flash and whatnot, which that's what get people excited, the flash. So they're like, all right, the competitive people, we'll put the Twitter stuff out there for the competitive people, and YouTube, which is face and front, show them the flash, show them the pretty graphics and whatnot. They knew how to market their people. They
And
knew
look at
what the
King of
heck they were
Fighters
doing.
15 right now. King of Fighters 15, guys like, well, that's like 2 second trailer. I don't get what I'm looking at with Benny Maru. Dude, that's a 6 bar combo. What the? How'd he do that? How'd he cancel like
Yeah.
this desperation move into that? It's like, oh, there's a mechanic there. And it's like, oh, wait, he got his anti air back. Oh my God, he's got it. Wait a minute. Iori ain't showing an anti air. Like they're never covering it. They're not changing the way they talked about him. They just showed me another trailer.
Hmm.
And people may laugh about this comparison, but how many times have you seen a Japanese RPG and it looks like the trailer for an anime intro? I don't even know
Absolutely.
if it's an SRPG, an action
Yep.
game, or what.
Yep. Yep.
And it is the equivalent of what you're giving us in some of these trailers. You need to take this opportunity to break people down on what kind of characters exist in the game before they have to spend $50, $60 as an investment to find out. They should know that. That should be why they bought it. Shouldn't be a surprise.
Yeah, yeah, and I've definitely been on that bandwagon. How once again we as we've been talking, we need to learn how to convey these games, how to present these games, and once you do that, I think you could develop a more solid fan base and working format for how to present your product. We're now about to hit almost that 2 hour mark, so we're definitely going to wrap this up. So I'm about to just go ahead and hold on. So I'm going to go ahead and ended with Wooly, what Wooly said, and Super Council Beast. What is it going to take for the fighting game community, sorry, fighting games to get bigger? Work, lots, lots of work. All
Agreed.
right. Show. Pardon me, Shaowebb. Thank you for tuning in with me. I appreciate it very much. It was a very fun opportunity to talk with you and everybody who's been with us. Thank you again for tuning us. Shaowebb, if people want to reach out to you, where can they find you?
I'm basically Shaowebb everywhere I go. I'm on Reset Era, NeoGaf, Twitter. Anywhere you look and see Shaowebb, I'm the only one. And as long as people want to talk, I am going to be one of the ones that talks. So I hope that
Definitely.
these podcasts keep coming. We need discussion.
I definitely think we could definitely see a future with me and you going here. In fact, I think we also may want to try to get Shinjay in here. Shinjay was a person who just did the first Link tournament for Blade Strangers. We might definitely be
Ooh.
having him next time. Maybe it could be all three of us together, or
Oh, yeah, I was watching that. It was a good one, too.
I didn't get a chance to finish watching it, but I'm glad that he's doing the work to try to promote Blade Strangers. Love that game. If he's gonna do the work, he got my blessings. So, and I'll definitely have Showebb's information down in the description. And you people know this is K-BAS. You already know where I am. Just holler at me if you need to reach out to me. All right, everybody. Thank you and peace out.
See ya.